Very good evening, friends. Meeting again in the session of Organon philosophy, and we were discussing regarding the Kant's philosophy. In last lecture, we have finished the chapter, the individualization, and today we are going to start one more chapter from third year syllabus, that is the homeopathic aggravation. That is the chapter number 34, the homeopathic aggravation. Aphorism 154. Last clause. A disease no that is of no very long standing ordinarily yields without any great degree of suffering to the first dose of this remedy, which is to say that in acute diseases we seldom see anything like striking aggravation unless the acute disease has drawn near death's door or is very severe, unless it has lasted many days and breaking down of blood and tissue is threatened or has taken place. Then we'll see sharp aggravation, great prostration, violent sweating, exhaustion, vomiting, and purging following the action of the remedy. I have seen most severe reaction which seems to be necessary to recovery. Such a state, such a state in acute disease where it has gone many days without remedy and a great threatening is present will be to an acute disease what many years would be to be a chronic disease of long standing. So here he started explaining about what Hahnemann have said in aphorism number 154. What he has said that the homeopathic aggravation in acute diseases happens to be there immediately after giving a right remedy. Generally, the potency which you have selected is more stronger than the natural disease, and the homeopathic aggravation has to happen immediately in acute diseases. This aggravation generally happens over there in the form of original symptoms getting aggravated, but at the same time, at the general level, patient starts feeling better. If patient would have not passed the stools so many days, the patient passes stools. If there is, it is a case of fever, the sweating started appearing. The patient who never had an appetite started feeling that he should eat. The generality starts improving. At the same time, the original features of the disease might have happened increased for time being. And this happens immediately within some few hours after getting the right remedy. And this aspect is very commonly seen in the homeopathic aggravation of the homeopathic aggravation in acute diseases. But the chronic, specifically the diseases which are long standing, what he says about the chronic diseases, let's see. He says long standing means as a matter of progress, if we say a disease of much progress or of considerable ultimates, we understand it better. If the disease has ultimated itself in a change of tissue, then you see a striking aggravation, even aggravation that cannot be recovered from, such as we find in advanced forms of tissue changes. Example, where the kidneys are destroyed or the liver is destroyed, or in thesis means tuberculosis, where the lungs are destroyed. So the things are rather different in chronics. In acutes, generally the things are more at the functional level, where pathology is generally not so much advanced. So even though the aggravation happens, which happens there at the functional level without causing any damage to the human health, but if you give a homeopathic remedy in chronic disease where the already a pathology is advanced, for example, a case of liver cirrhosis is there. For example, it is a case of renal failure is there. If there is a case of some heart pathology or fatty degeneration of the heart is there, or if there is an advanced problem at the in the lungs in the form of thesis tuberculosis, in such types of cases, the aggravation, such type of aggravation might create a problem. And that's why You should be cautious enough when you are dealing with such pathology. Here, you have to think exactly what potency one should utilize. Here, if you go with centesimal with the similar method as you use in acute, then definitely it will create a problem. And that's why one should be very thorough regarding using the potencies. And this chapter, homeopathic aggravation, Kent has dealt with the practical aspects, and that's why in the first paragraph only he has explained what may be the possible problems which arises when you deal with acutes and when you deal with chronics. With acutes, the things are rather simple because the things are more functional. But in chronics, where the end or ultimates are there, where pathology is so advanced, in such types of cases, it is rather difficult to cure such types of cases. And if aggravation happens, that aggravation is difficult to come out from that aggravation. And that's why you should be very cautious. A disease ought always to be considered as to whether it is acute or chronic. So first understand what you are treating, whether you are dealing with acute or whether you are dealing with chronic. Where there are no tissue changes, where no ultimates are present, then you may expect the remedy to cure the patient without any serious aggravation or without any sharp suffering, for there is no necessity of reaction from the serious structural change. So, if you are dealing with the pathologies where the functional changes have happened, there is no structural damage in the form of some ultimate pathology. In such types of cases, generally there is no aggravation, or even though aggravation happens, it never troubles the patient. Where there is a deep-seated septic condition, where pyoemia must be the result, you will find something vomiting or purging. As a reaction of vital force of the economy, when order is established, this order, which is attended by reaction, as it were, commences this process of house cleaning. So, in such types of cases, there are certain varieties of reactions which you can see. Patient started getting the diarrhea and vomiting, where there is a case of pyoemia, and because of which the patient is feeling better. When such type of discharge started, patient starts feeling better. It does it itself. The drug does not do it. A crude substance is used. It is the action of the drug, of course, but the action of dynamic drug is to turn the economy into order. And this is the one thing one must learn and one must understand. When you are using crude drugs, specifically when the allopathic medicines have used to be used, they always acts on with the primary action. It means whatever is the action happens to be there after giving medicine, it is the action of a medicine on the human being. It is direct action. So there are changes happens inside the tissues, inside the cells because of direct effect of that medicine. So those are primary actions which develops because of medicine when given in crude form. But when you are selecting homeopathic remedy, and you are giving in dynamic form, there is no question of a primary action. What happens is nothing but just a stimulus to for the nature, or for the natural vital force to react in such a manner that whatever is disorder, it comes into order. This is part again goes into ease. So the pathology is getting converted into physiology just by a stimulus. It is nothing that medicine will going to do. Whatever is going to be done is by the patient's vital force, only the stimulation of that vital force, bringing back again it on the track is the need of the medicine. There is no question of any specific medicine that will produce such a change. So it is with chronic disease. When the chronic disease has not ultimated itself in tissue changes, you may get no aggravation at all, unless perhaps it be a very slight exacerbation of the symptoms, and that slight exacerbation of the symptoms is of a different character. It is the establishment of the remedy as a new disease upon the economy instead of the reaction which corresponds to the process of house cleaning. Elimination must take place, as we know, probably from the bowels or the stomach, by vomiting or expectoration or by kidneys, and in those cases where everything has been suppressed. So when you deal with chronics and you started giving the homeopathic medicine, the body has reacted in a proper manner. Patient started feeling better, but he complains, doctor, I am feeling better. My problem has getting settled, but I started passing stools 3 or 4 times in a day. What Kent says, this is called as house cleaning. These are natural outlets through which the discharge is taken out, and this is the thing which generally happens when you deal with chronics where pathology is not so advanced and the disorder is getting into order. Such types of elimination methods happens to be there. It may produce vomiting sometimes, it may produce diarrhea sometimes, it may produce expectoration sometimes, it may induce sometimes sweating, it may induce more urination sometimes. These are things, these are the processes which happens to be there. It may look like an aggravation when you have had for years a limb paralyzed from neuritis. Suppose after you administer remedy that goes right to the spot, that is in the very highest sense homeopathic or truly specific, that paralyzed limb commences to tingle and creep like a crawling interiorly of ants, tingling sometimes from which he cannot sleep for days and nights. This is due to the reaction of nerves of the part. They are called into new life, new activity. I have seen this in paralysis. You take, for instance, a child who has lain in the stupor for a long time from inaction of the brain. The tingling that comes in the scalp, in the fingers, in the toes is dreadful. The child turns and twists and screeches and cries, and it requires an iron hand on the part of doctor to hold that mother from doing something to hush that cry. For just so sure that is done, that child is go back into the death. That is the reaction. So that all over the benumb parts or where the blood begins to flow into the parts where the circulation has been feeble, where the nerves take on sensation again, we have reaction, which is but the result of turning into order. See how nicely he has elaborated. He has given 2 examples. One example of a complete paralyzed patient, and you have started giving medicine. A patient who never had a sensation, who never had he had both sensory and motor paralysis, and there is no movement at all, and you have started giving medicine, and your remedy is very perfect. So, after giving the remedy, he started getting crawling sensation. He started getting over there irritation, itching, sometimes burning. It indicates that sensation is getting back. Even though it troubles the patient, it is a good sign. It indicates that life is again started flowing in that part, because of which this has happened. But many times patient never understand this and they go again back to remove that by means of some certain allopathic medicine and leads towards the death. The second example which he has given is related with the child who is completely in a stuporous condition, comatose condition, and if you have given remedy, a very perfect remedy, and when remedy has acted very perfectly, the brain started functioning again. The first it starts showing the reactions in the form of some jerks, in the some form of movements, in the some form of twisting of the body, and problem arises that the mother feels that she is the my child is getting trouble and she asked the doctor to give something, and if he gives something the child leads towards the death. So a reaction which is necessary in order to come out again into the life, which has stimulated by your remedy, then you have to keep your hands off. You have to understand what is happening, what is going on. If you understand that, then you can understand, yes, definitely patient is coming out of that situation. That part has been benumbed and dead, and when circulation takes place in the part, in order to repair its tissue, we have reaction which is attended with distress. So reaction is always in distress. It is not so plain. But if this reaction happens, it is necessary reaction. If the physician cannot look upon that and bear it, he will have trouble. If he thinks it is an indication for another remedy, he will spoil his case. So if patient is coming out from that specific entity, then you have to keep your hands off. It indicates that patient is coming out. Don't interfere it. That is more important. If you start giving the medicine to stop that reaction, then definitely you will spoil that case which was coming out. So whenever the patient is on the phase of recovery, keep it in your mind. Don't disturb by giving another remedy at that time. And that is very much necessary. And for that purpose only, he has written this chapter where he wants to explain what is exactly meant by homeopathic aggravation, that you must know. You must understand. If you understand, then you will never give a medicine to the patient. What he says in next paragraph is very important. We must discriminate. Discriminate, we have discussed yesterday. Discriminate means to differentiate between two things. Bheda bhed janne. We must discriminate between that which is reaction and that which calls for a remedy. So we must understand whether it is a reaction, a good reaction on the part of patient, or whether it is a bad reaction on the part of patient. These things are only seen in homeopathy, never in any other practice. Sometimes physician will driven to his wits end in dealing with these reactions. It is sometimes a dreadful thing to look upon, and the physician may be turned out of the doors. Let him meet at let him meet it as a man. Let him be a patient with it, because the ignorance of the mother or the friends can be no excuse for his violation of the principle even once. What he says is very correct. If you are treating such types of cases and if you understand the things have happened in the right direction, even though there is twisting and patient is shrieking, there is shrill or something, movements or twitching or twisting, let it happen. If you consider this is the reaction, let it happen. You have to tell and explain the relatives or attendants that this is a good reaction which is happening on the part of patient, because patient is coming out of coma, out of stupor state. It is your duty. You should not, what he says is very important. There is no excuse for his violation of principle. You should not violate the principle. You have understood that whatever is happening in right direction, don't interfere. A disease of very long standing sometimes fails to yield without this aggravation and disturbance and turmoil in the economy. And the deeper it is, more tissue change you have to contend with. And the more wonderful and distressing and painful is this reaction. So what he is saying, if you are treating such type of chronic disease, then definitely whenever it will disappear, it is always a dreadful condition. It creates a problem. It is not, it is always a distressing and painful state. Hahnemann himself have stated the same thing in aphorism 148, where he explains that say, chronic disease will not yield with a single dose. It will require same remedy in repetition in increasing potency, or sometimes many remedies in succession, and it never disappears so silently. It is always producing a distressing condition. When a patient comes back after every dose of medicine with violent reaction, with violent aggravation of the disease, with violent aggravation of symptoms, you know then that there is some deep-seated trouble. There is a difference between the ultimates of the disease and absolute weakness of the vital force. There is such a state as weakness of the economy, and there is such a state as activity of the economy with much tissue change. In the feeble patients, you may expect feeble reaction or none at all after your remedy, but in the feeble cases, there are of such character that you have few symptoms and you can very seldom find remedy truly specific. So what he is explaining over there, that you must understand how to deal with such types of cases. If the patient's vitality is good enough, you will see the such types of reactions, and where patient shows the distressing symptoms when he is coming out. And when distressing symptoms which are at the superficial level they comes out, it indicates there is deep-seated or deep-rooted problem. But if patient is feeble, whose susceptibility is very low, then after giving remedy, you will not see such type of reactions instantaneously. In such types of cases, it is always better to give LM scale, LM potency in repeated doses to arouse the vitality, and then only the patient will come out. So see, these are the things which he explains over there are very important. These are most practical things which we used to get or we used to find it out in our day-to-day practice. In next paragraph, what he says, for example, say you get a patient that is destined to go into consumption. Consumption is the word used for tuberculosis. A merely suspicious case. You administer the right remedy and violent reaction comes, a foreshadowing of what he will go through years from now if he is not cured by the remedy. A shocking condition will come upon him. He may be frightened and come back and tell you that that was an awful dose of medicine, poison, etc. That is the remedy disease. Those are the symptoms of the remedy. The symptoms of the remedy foreshadowing the future of the case. Because if that remedy was not similar enough to him, it could not do such a thing, and that it is because of similitude of his state, and he may only have those symptoms in shadow. But the remedy cannot give him symptoms that he has not. It cannot give him symptoms that are not related to him except in those cases that are called oversensitive. Oversensitive, you know, are such as are capable of proving everything that comes along. You may know whether the patient is oversensitive and proving the drug or whether he has vigorous constitution and is getting an aggravation. The remedy will be exaggerated in oversensitives and sometimes in those of weakly constitution, especially those with very narrow receding chin, those who have sunken eyes, those who have senility marked in the eye. So, one more reaction which he has explained over there, if you are treating a patient of a consumption, for example, a tuberculosis, and you would have given a right remedy. If right remedy is given, the patient starts feeling better at the general level, but he will come out some superficial vigorous troubles, and those symptoms are troublesome for the patient, with which patient feels he is distressed, but with which he is coming out of the situation. That is not the symptom which is produced by medicine. It is the symptom which indicates that disease is going from very great organ or organs of greater importance to the organs of lesser importance. When it comes to the superficial level, it is always distressing. It is not the symptom which is produced by the remedy, it is the symptom, or it is these are the symptoms which are appeared because the disorder is getting into the order, and the disease which was rather deeper in plane now coming to the superficial plane. And if it is so, then definitely you have to keep watch. You should not immediately try to antidote that. You should not immediately try to stop that action. Just understand where the disease is shifting, where the symptoms are coming, and if you understand them properly, then definitely you will going to get a cure in that case if you wait for a longer time of duration. And last part which he has mentioned over there is very important, that is related with the idiosyncratic patient. Generally, if the patient is oversensitive, where you should be very cautious, because these are the those who proves every remedy what they get, and that's why here the repetition is not needed. Here you have to be very watchful, and you should wait for the reaction and you see what happens after giving the remedy. These are the patient where you must find it out what type of reaction you get. And lastly, what he says, last sentence, the remedy will be exaggerated in oversensitive and sometimes in those of weakly constitution, especially those with a very narrow receding chin, those who have sunken eyes, those who have senility marked in the eyes, where you can see such types of reaction. So some part regarding the homeopathic aggravation he has tried to explain in up till now, where he tried to focus more on the practical part of the organ, how one should go ahead, what one should do, how he can think about the exactly whether it is homeopathic aggravation, whether it is a medicinal aggravation, or what type of reaction comes out, that we have to understand first before prescribing a next remedy. So that's all for today's session. We'll meet tomorrow with the next part of the same chapter. And today evening, we're going to learn one more practical remedy, very useful in day-to-day practice. That is the Thlaspi Bursa Pastoris at 8:15 p.m. So that's all for today. Thank you and good evening.
Thank you, sir. Have a good evening.